Hello and welcome to Leadership Line of Sight. My name is Taylor Hack, and I am excited to be here today as our guest is David Hudson. David Hudson is the Director of Engineering for Big Human. He is a serial entrepreneur. He has founded several things and has done really amazing things at the edge of software development and branding. And I can't wait to introduce you. So I'm going to bring David up right now. How are you, sir?
Hello, I'm doing awesome. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. It's a good day. It's a spring day, and I'm excited to talk to you because my understanding is that your world is moving at a mile a minute right now.
Oh yeah. Software engineering has always been pretty crazy. The advent of the internet, and even really before that, it has been exploding ever since. 30 years is a pretty short time, and the older I get, the shorter 30 years sounds. And here we are at the birth of AI. So it's interesting.
And that's something that's kind of sounds crazy. I want to give a little bit of backstory. So you have been in what we call the tech industry in general, but founding things for around a decade or a little more than that now?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I've started, well, I started my own company. Really, my first company was probably 20. In fact, no, it was 23 years ago. I was 16.
Holy wow.
I still have the article from the paper, where it was like group of 16-year-olds start a web development agency. And I think we called it Extreme Design. And which is
very 16-year-old of you.
Very 16-year-old of me. And we did all right. We didn't do too bad. I bombed 3 or 4 companies in my early 20s, and I learned a ton doing that. And then I finally kind of started getting it right. And so I've made a bunch of things.
So when you started to kind of find your stride, what were the things that you look back on that you were like, oh yeah, you know what? I think that anybody who's looking at this path, here's the big perils.
Yeah.
Where did you bomb?
Oh man, where did I bomb? Where did I not bomb? Definitely the school of hard knocks here. I mean, maybe the number one thing, just based on, if I was just trying to give the shortest sentence possible, I would say don't give up. There's a moment I think that happens in every kid's life when you realize that your parents are just like human beings, and I'm a parent now, and I know my kids are one day going to go, oh, Dad's just a person, you know what I mean? Like, and he makes mistakes, and there are, that's kind of how it goes. I used to think that the world's run by like grown-ups that like really had it together, and that I just needed to be like them. And the reality is that everybody, I don't care who they are, has to strive to get whatever they want. They have to make mistakes. They have to fail. They're going to make mistakes. And so accepting that and putting mistakes and failures to the side and continuing is probably the hardest thing.
That like failing forward mentality.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it's, I don't want to like glorify, I want to be careful about like glorifying hustle and like, I feel like people talk about failure all the time to the point where it becomes almost cliche, but it really does help. As much as it hurts, and it does hurt. And I don't care what anybody says, a lot of the Instagram influencers and stuff and entrepreneurship, they'll just be like, oh yeah, it's so great. You get out there and you just work 20-hour days and everything's going to be great. And that's not really always how it goes. I've lost tremendous amounts of money at times where I didn't have tremendous amounts of money to lose, and where I thought I'll never, what's that quote from the Tiger King? I'll never financially recover from this, like I've had that moment like at least 5 times. But I always did, but in the moment it feels completely irrecoverable. It feels like there's just no way out of it. It feels very real. And there's a phenomenal, a poem that I absolutely love and I live by. It's called "If" by Rudyard Kipling, and if you haven't read it, it's incredible. I think everybody should read it. But he talks about treating triumph and disaster as what they are, which is imposters. Your greatest triumph and your worst disaster really aren't like your triumph wasn't as great as maybe you thought it was, and the disaster wasn't as bad as you thought it was. And really life is more in the middle, So
Can you take us into a couple of those moments for you? Let's talk about, like,
sure.
just because we're on the subject, the point where you felt very Tiger King-esque, where you were just like, it crashed down. I will never
Yeah.
financially recover. Do you remember one of those moments?
Yeah, I was sitting on the terrace of an Airbnb in Spain, and which sounds amazing. I was working remotely. I've always worked remote. That's definitely my personal favorite. And so we were in Spain, and so I was doing all the same stuff I would normally do here in the States, but I was doing it there. But it was nighttime. It was like maybe 9 o'clock at night or something. So, which I think it's 7 hours ahead. So it was a 2 o'clock call in Central Time. And I'm talking to an investor in a company that I had started. And won't say names, but the investor essentially tried to do a hostile takeover on the company. And I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know that was I guess you see that in movies, right? Like, I just never thought it would happen to me. And there was a moment where he said, like, the gist of it is, he said, you can either have 10% of a big company or you can have 100% of nothing. And I said, I'll take nothing before I will continue to work with you. So, like, we're ending this relationship right now and I'm out. And I hung up, and I remember thinking, like, I'm in this beautiful place. I'm looking at a place called La Cathedral, which is one of the most beautiful Gothic churches on the planet in Sevilla, Spain. I'm looking at this church. It's a beautiful night. And I was crushed. I was absolutely crushed. And I thought, I just lost $100K. Like, all my investments, all the money I'd put into it, credit card debt, everything, and it's all gone. It's like the investor's money is now gone, but he's a gazillionaire. I don't think he probably cares a little bit. I'm going to upset his coffee in the next morning or something, But for me, that was a huge amount, absolutely massive amount of money. And right then, I just that was very, very hard. That was definitely one of the darker moments of my life. And he was right, by the way, in the sense that I could have continued with him. I could have allowed him to do the hostile takeover. He would have gotten the vast majority of the company by essentially stealing it. And I would have had a small percentage of a company that was already very successful. And in other words, I would have made some money from it. But for me, the principle of it was that I'm not okay with people doing that. And I don't want bad guys to win. And if that means that I lose too, at that moment, I was willing to accept that, but it hurts really bad. You know what I mean? And so entrepreneurship is great. I highly recommend everybody do it. It is the way. I don't know why anybody does anything else. But don't expect to not get hit. You're definitely going to get hit, and it's definitely going to hurt if you're trying, right? If you're really giving your best effort, and you just have to be willing to take that knock and continue. But it will probably come in a way that you don't expect, and in a way that you're in a moment when you're not ready.
I love it. I love those. So those gut check moments. Where it's like, this is who you are, and this is the hill I would die on.
Yeah,
I think that those are so meaningful because you probably learned more about you in that afternoon than anything you could have traded. You might have just got a degree in David Hudson.
Yeah, no, that's a fact. That's absolutely a fact. Yeah, I learned a lot.
So how long did it hurt for? So I know that sometimes the victories are fleeting, but and sometimes the wounds leave scars, right? Yeah. But when you take a look at like that moment, knowing that, even if it killed everything, you were just going to be like, that's how it goes.
Yeah.
If you were to go, like, what would it be? 9 days, 90 days, 9 months, 9 years past that? Like, what was recovery?
It still makes me twitch every once in a while, I'll be honest. But the thing about it is, it's like, it's like bad tasting medicine, like it's always going to taste bad, but it's good for you. Like, in other words, if I think about all of the successes I've had because of what that guy did, that I might not have had because of that guy, like I learned a level of strength that I did not know I had, and was not really showing until I was forced to show it. And I'm able to take that with me into meetings and into negotiations and things like that. And I'm also more wary to an appropriate amount. Trust but verify. I still trust people. I love people, but I double check that contract, right? As I recommend everyone should do. So yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I look back on it feeling two ways. And that moment was a sad moment, and it will never be a happy moment when I look back on it. But all of the many, many, many good things that have happened since then are overwhelming. So I would happily do it all over again to have the same results since then.
Something that I've crafted in my mind from similar experiences and that I see in other people is this thing that almost haunts me. And the phrase that I've come up with is your best weapons match the wounds that you have from yesterday.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good.
And so coming out of that, is it the understanding that you will go all the way to the end? Is that the weapon you gained?
There's no question about it. Yeah, I definitely know. I know more about what I'm made of. Do you know what I mean? And so, a huge learning from me on that one, to kind of take it like a step further, is I realized like I try and like lead with kindness and lead with my heart and be a nice person, and that's the good thing. Like I recommend that to everybody: be a nice person, right? But also when you're in negotiations with somebody like an investor, investors are not your friends. They're not your buddies. They're not your business partners. That doesn't mean that they're bad people or anything like that. They're not. Most of them are great people. But you just have to be, aware of who you're talking to, right? And so if they're really nice and buddy, that can't be a thing that influences your decision on how to move forward or whether or not to trust them or things like that. And also because I was so nice and so buddy, which is kind of in my nature, I think that what he saw was weakness. And in other words, he thought I was showing my belly, and he went for it. And I wasn't showing my belly, and he lost, but we both lost, right? And did it have to be that way? Like, what if I had shown more strength up front? If I had shown more strength up front and less buddiness, he would have realized, hey, I don't want to be an adversary with this guy. I probably won't win that. But he did the mental calculus of, I could hostile take over this company. This guy's, a nice chump, and this will be easy, right? That's what I think he was thinking. And so since then, I've learned to, especially in negotiations, put on a stronger, more serious front, and make sure that they understand, like, basically that they understand on the front end that I'm not a pushover. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not a bad guy. I'm a nice guy. I care about people tremendously. But don't try what that guy tried. It's not going to work.
Don't confuse kindness with weakness.
Yeah, exactly. So I've learned a lot.
Let's go to the other end of the scale. So when you're talking about one of your greatest victories, when was the moment that you felt like, I remember walking into my office one day and literally talking to my assistant and joking around and being like, I am victorious. Someone must deliver me all the bagels and coffee in the land. Right?
Yeah.
What was the moment that comes to mind when you think of that?
I'll tell you, it was when I was 16. That first agency that I started, there was this really nice guy. He's a chiropractor, and he was the first person that trusted me to build a website for him. He said, "Hey, do you know anybody that could build a website?" And I said, "Sure, I could build it for you." And he said, "How much?" And I'm 16. I just went for the biggest number I could think of. I was like $1,000, which I thought was like $1 million. You know what I mean? Like I'm just, I never thought he would say yes. I just thought, well, give it a go. And of course, now I know that this programming is worth a lot more than that. And he was like, sure, let's do it. I built him a website. It probably took me 2 days. I waited maybe 2 weeks to give it to him because I knew I'd completed it pretty fast. And I did a great job. I did exactly what he wanted. And he wrote the check for $1,000. And I couldn't believe it. I was absolutely addicted, from that moment on to those types of wins. You know what I mean? It's less about the money, and it's more about like somebody putting trust in you to do a good job, and you do it, and they value your effort, and money being just an easy indicator, like an easy ruler for value. People value your services more. They're willing to pay more for it. And so I love that feeling. I love that feeling.
Man, that must have been amazing. It must have really felt like you were no longer at the kids' table.
Yeah. I mean, that was part of my problem in the very beginning, is I got a little bit too big for my britches. I thought, like, for example, that the money would just never stop flowing. We started doing really well, and I'm 16. What do I need? I eat turkey sandwiches. I had a $500 Ford F-150. I mean, like, I had no expenses. And so I just thought, as money comes in, I can just spend it. No need to save. I'm making plenty of money. And I never thought about, like, what happens when business slows down, and business does slow down. It's just the nature of the economy. It's the nature of reality. There's nothing that you can do to stop it. There are certainly things you can do to prevent it from putting you under, for sure. But at that time, I wasn't aware of it. I wasn't saving my acorns for the winter. I was gobbling them up. And so, like, one of my first failures was that we ran out of money. And to this day, I'm like, I was a kid, so what? It's fine, but I just think, gosh, what an unnecessary reason to fail, when I could have just been packing that money away. Now I know.
Yeah, so interesting. There's so many people that treat money like walking into their pantry and eating all the food.
Yeah.
They do look at it like, it comes through and then I can make more. And they don't understand necessarily that it never gets easier. You just get better.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
The competition will catch up to you. The world will change. Things will shift. And there is no set it and forget it.
Yeah, that's it. And on that, there's at least one way I know of to overcome that a little bit, which is to welcome the competition. Expect it. Don't just, but not even just expect it, want it to happen. Because when good competition, comes for you, you have no choice but to get better, So it's very, competition is a good thing for everybody. And it's a good thing for improving your services to a level where it's difficult for people to continue to compete with you, right? If you keep going and if you see it that way. So
that has to come with a lot of self-confidence.
Self-confidence, I think, comes from experience. I think it comes from getting your tail kicked and then realizing you can come out the other end and be okay. Self-confidence in that sense, I would be very careful about, like, something like arrogance. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because the moment, if my life has taught me anything, it's the moment you say, "Oh, I'm good. Everything's great." That's when life comes in swinging. So instead, you say, "Look, there's no tomorrow. We're going to work as hard as we can today, and the next day, and the next day, and we're just going to keep going. And if we're flush with money, guess what? That's a fantastic time to make more money." You ever watch that show Alone? It's the survivor show. They try and survive out in the wild. And so often you see somebody, they catch like one fish, and not that I would ever survive more than a day in the wild, by the way. I'm a full-on software engineer. But there's one thing I know as an entrepreneur, which is, they'll catch one fish and they'll be super hungry. And so they'll stop fishing and they'll stop to cook their fish and they'll eat because they're starving. Like, and I get it. Like, that's probably horrendous. Okay. But the point is, if the fish are biting, don't stop casting. You know what I mean? If you have enough to eat today, great. Now continue casting and get enough to eat tomorrow too. Mm-hmm. It's when you slow down, when you say, "Oh, I have enough." A lot of people think that you're being greedy if you go the opposite direction. I don't have enough. I never have enough. I got to go. Let's get after it. The problem is, if you say you have enough, that's like tempting life to kick you in the teeth, in my opinion. The moment you say, "Oh, this is fine. That's an acceptable level of business," and okay. Then the economy takes a downturn and you're screwed, or something like that.
And sometimes it can be like way out of your hands. Like, I remember one of my first kind of wanderings into tech is I had a buddy who was making a website, and the website he brought it to me to get my opinion. He had investors and everything. And he's like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like he's a friend of mine. And then as we went a little bit further, he's like, well, every time you do things on social media, everybody listens. Like, would you become part of this and help me on like the marketing and promotion side? And I was like, well, that sounds interesting. I've got a bunch of other things on the go, but let me dig into it further. And unfortunately, I don't have that ability to not give you a straight opinion. I was just like, if you're really asking, I'm really going to answer. Are you okay with this? I was like, what you're creating is an aggregate news service, and the giants that exist in this space will look at you and you will be dead.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, you're coming into this place, but you did this one thing that was super cool. The website was called Trend Gorilla. And what it was is a single view where you could see things like Twitter and news and images to understand why something was trending right now. And it would list the top trends coming off of the back of Google Trends. And you could literally just decode them. And this was something that was like in 2000, I think it was like 2010 or 11. And so I was interested in that. And he actually brought that back to his investors, and it killed the company because they didn't want to reinvest to pivot. And so off I went with my first podcast. And what we were doing was reviewing these trending items. And all of a sudden the website hits were crazy, like 80,000 website hits a week.
Oh, nice.
And we're like, okay, we got it. Like, this is going to be something. And then Google changed how they valued their search engine optimization. And because we didn't have unique content, it killed us overnight.
Yeah.
And that was like just something way outside of our hands, right?
Yeah. It's a nonstop changing landscape. Totally.
So now you're at this edge of AI, right? And when we go into like what you're partaking in right now, is it right to say that one of the center things is literally anything?
At the moment, yeah. I mean, so here's the thing about what I think AI is and what I think it's about to be. I think that it would be a giant mistake for anybody to say, oh, I know what this is, and I'm going to start a huge business around this one thing and go at it forever. So when we talked about literally anything at Big Human, and whether or not we should do this or whatever, one of the things that I said was, we need to be ready for this to constantly evolve. Not only is ChatGPT going to come out with newer versions, there's going to be ChatGPT 5, which is going to be insane. I already got to talk to somebody at OpenAI about that, which was crazy. But it's, like, we're going to have to manage that upgrade. The prompts are going to have to change. All of our software around it's going to have to change. There's also going to be multiple ChatGPT competitors, and there already are. Like Open Assistant came out, fully open source models and stuff like that, which is crazy. So the landscape is going to change really, really fast. And if that's not obvious, already. And so for me, what I'm interested in is, well, maybe I should say a philosophy that I have about software engineering. And this is a little controversial, but it's true. I mean, I think this is like capital T true about software engineering. When we write software, and I had to accept this when I was 12 years old, it occurred to me pretty quickly. What we're doing is automating human behavior, right? So I don't care, like if you're building a website, right? You are now replacing the marketing person who stood on the street corner with the banners on each side, right? Like you're replacing those people. Software engineering, by its nature, automates human labor. That's what it does. And here's AI that is about to automate a lot more labor, probably. And I mentioned this, to somebody several years back, and they were upset. I don't know if they had their job automated out or what, but they did not like it that I said that. And I'm not like super proud of it. It's just a fact of the job. They said, well, what about when you get automated out of a job? And I said, I hope I'm the one that does it. To me, which goes back to accepting competition and wanting competition. I want to take AI to its furthest limits, even if that means that it replaces me. But I just want to be the one that is at the front making that happen. Does that make sense? Like, in other words, I don't want automation to be something that happens to me. I want it to be something that happens with me. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I think it's with technology, it's so critical to, rather than be afraid of it, which is very easy to do and very understandable, to instead embrace it and take it as far as you can. All that to say that literally anything is a fun experiment that could turn into something really crazy. We've already had investors reach out to us. I have no idea if that's going to go anywhere or not. I think that even if it goes somewhere, that we will have to pivot in 3 to 6 months to stay relevant, or we're going to be out. And I think that's kind of everybody that's building around AI right now. They better be ready to grow and grow fast. I hope that they're ready to invest a lot on software development and upkeep, because it's going to be a whole new world in 2 years, 3 years.
I think that that's probably a big message to VCs, that when you're looking at the teams that you may invest in, the people are going to matter so much right now.
Yes,
because
tremendously.
do they have that insight to know that, like, this is not a sprint, this is a marathon?
Yeah, exactly.
And every day the water level is going to rise, and every day we might have to take a look at the core of our idea and say, where is it broken now? Like,
Yeah.
where did it break overnight?
Yeah, and it will be overnight. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. GPT-5, one of the folks I talked to at OpenAI said that it's going to be fairly close to an AGI. And I think that is probably, I'm just going to guess, and this is a wild guess, but probably accurate. I used to think that AGI was not, if you had asked me a year ago, how far are we from AGI? I would have said 15, 20 years, and now I'm thinking, will we have it by the end of the year? Will it be an early? Will Christmas come early? I don't know that, but the methodology being created around the existing AI is insane.
I want to break that down for a second. So, am I right in saying that you would see the current version, ChatGPT-4, as machine learning?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then what you're saying is when we move to GTP-5, it will be artificial general intelligence.
I think it'll be close enough that the arguing it would be just semantics. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's going to be able to answer just about any question that you have at a fairly high level of quality. I think that hallucinations will still be a thing, but I don't think it's going to matter very much because of the tools that are being created around it, right? So, for example, have you heard of reflection by any chance, or AutoGPT or Baby AGI or anything like that?
I've heard of many things, but it's almost like a lot of the times this stuff comes as like whispers out in places, and there's pockets of like real inside baseball that are talking about these elements. But what do they mean to you?
Sure. So, okay, if you ask ChatGPT a question, a lot of people will say, "Oh, it'll lie to you. It'll lie to you." And that's, by the way, it'll totally lie to you. That's totally accurate. Those lies are not lies in the sense that it doesn't know it's lying. It doesn't know anything. It doesn't even understand the concept of words or things like that. It is a statistical tool, right? And that's it. It runs a bunch of stats on what the next word should be, and it goes, "Oh, this next word should, like, 98% likely is the next word," and it goes, "Boop, there's the next word." Only they don't call them words; they call them tokens and blah blah blah. But anyway, so the point is, when it lies, when it hallucinates, if you ask it about its hallucination, oftentimes it will course correct. It will say, "Oh, yeah, you're right. That's not correct. George Washington didn't have a third wife, and it's actually blah, 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 blah," right? So if you ask it to reflect on its own answer, it will often improve its answer and correct it. Like, it can almost recognize when it's hallucinating. Of course, it can't recognize anything. It has no consciousness, to be really clear. But it will be able to kind of course correct its hallucination and give you a better answer. That is called reflection. Reflection, there was a paper that came out in March about reflection. I think it was called Reflection, Improving GPT-4 Using Reflections. I think it's the actual title, something to that effect. It came out in March of this year. Phenomenal paper. And basically what they found is all of the tests that they use to understand how good an LLM is, a large language model is, they were able to improve on GPT's responses by 40% on almost every test. So that's not a small improvement. That's like a massive improvement. And we've only really just begun. GPT-4 just came out, and GPT-4 is a massive improvement over GPT-3, right? And so I see this, and I see other developers starting to create like their apps using reflection, like literally anything we're working on, a variation on reflection in the background. It's not up yet, but which is probably going to substantially improve what you can make with it. Will it be enough to be relevant? I don't know. I hope so. But I guess my point is, what happens in a year? Like, let's say the technology stays at GPT-4. Like, let's say they never increase to GPT-5. What other tech are we going to come up with to support GPT-4 to make it substantially better? The answer is probably a tremendous amount.
Yeah.
Here's a crazy example, but it's totally true. The web, okay, when we go to websites today, all websites are written in HTML. In the end, HTML, CSS style sheets, and JavaScript, right? If you don't know what that is, that's totally cool. But just know that HTML has existed since almost day one of the internet, right? It's an old technology. And as a developer, like when the internet first came around, it first started getting big, and I started building websites, what I learned is the only way I could build the websites I wanted was to force HTML to do things it was never designed to do, right? Mm-hmm. And here we are, 26 years later, whatever, and it's worse than that. Like it's the web is only good because developers like me have gone, okay, this technology is old and it sucks, and we're going to find all these hacks to make it better, right? To the point where we have a word for it. It's called polyfills, right? So we're taking old tech and turning it into like the modern, beautiful web that we all know and love today. And I think the exact same thing is happening with AI right now. Like the tools that we're using to kind of force GPT to improve its abilities are just getting started, and they're already awesome. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years, but what I know is it's going to be bonkers. It's going to be a big game changer.
I keep thinking about loopers. Like, I think that one of the most valuable positions right now that might be fleeting is being the human in the loop, right? Getting those reiterations of responses from ChatGPT, and then right now it's manual, cause for reflection, right?
Yeah. So if the human is the one helping, it depends, right? So you want ChatGPT to have an inner monologue, essentially. Like you want it to think about its own responses. Mm-hmm. So if you say, hey, you got that wrong, that's not really reflection. That's you telling it you got that wrong. But if you said, hey, tell me, was that a quality response? That is having it reflect. So sorry, maybe you were saying the same thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that would be one element of being that human in a loop. And then the other thing is to basically organize the way that you talk to it in saying, like, let's create an outline. Then let's start with section 1. Then, hey, is that a quality response? What could we do to make it more powerful on this side? You can kind of drag it around and get it to build things beyond what it would have originally built, depending on your ability to interact with it.
Yeah, so a couple of different things. A one-shot prompt, what's called a one-shot prompt, where you basically just give it one prompt and hope for the best, is often not going to be good enough. It's almost never good enough. And so a lot of the people, especially early on, that didn't understand ChatGPT and said, oh, this is like, it's just okay, like made this mediocre poem, whatever. It's like, well, did you try more than one prompt, or did you, like what's, because it's so tremendously powerful if you prompt it multiple times. And then once you get good at prompting it multiple times, you're almost like setting traps for it. Like you're setting up strategies for it, right? So that after its next step, it's going to amplify its answer, and you just know it's going to amplify its answer. So like you said, having it build the outline, right? Then having it create subtopics. With software engineering, for example, we have project managers who write what's called a ticket, and a ticket is for every software engineering feature for whatever it is that we're building. Let's say it's a website. So you might have a ticket that says build the homepage. Well, build the homepage is not a great ticket because that's very generic. I mean, I could build a homepage right now, and it could be absolutely terrible and be not what you want. We need more information. So showing that ticket, to ChatGPT and saying, hey, write out feature sets for this ticket. It might say, build the homepage, create a header that says X, create a body content that says Y, create a footer that says Z, right? Okay, great. Now I can say, write user acceptance requirements for that, right? So, okay, user acceptance requirement might be when I click this link, the link goes to the about page, for example, or something like that, right? So these are tasks that for project managers are insanely tedious. I absolutely love project managers. I'm absolutely dependent on their work. Without them, projects just wouldn't go as well. All software engineers owe a great debt to project managers. But a big part of their job is just the tedium of making these tickets, but they're so important. And so why do it yourself now? Like, why not use ChatGPT? I don't, like, it would be crazy not to. I did an early test of it when we had a client. We were talking about some base level requirements. We had put together this slide deck that had, it was like 2 slides worth of potential requirements for the project they wanted. I literally just copied out the slides, pasted them in ChatGPT. I said, hey, you're an expert project manager, right? So I start out with, this is who you are. We'll talk more about that in a minute, I'm sure. But hey, this is who you are. You're an expert project manager. The client's giving you the following requirements. Create a series of tickets for each one of these requirements, including user acceptance requirements. And it did it. It made this beautiful list of tickets that any developer would be super happy to receive. It had intuitive answers, like answers that if I didn't know better, I would think it had thought about. You know what I mean? Absolutely. Now, does a project manager still need to review that work? Absolutely. Could there be something wrong? Could it have hallucinated? Absolutely. It probably did. If you're looking to ChatGPT for factual answers, and let's say that there's a very high risk of something bad happening if you treat its answers as factual, you should not use ChatGPT for that. I'm not going to use it to diagnose a medical problem for me. I might ask it, hey, I've got tummy troubles. What are some options, right? And then immediately fact check that, right? Just to get some ideas. But that's at its heart what I think it is today. It's a thesaurus for ideas. Does that make sense?
It totally does. And also, I like what you're talking about with giving it an idea and then working it in to be like, okay, now check that against this. Or if we are talking about doing something like designing a website, to feed it a whole bunch of data that you've already compiled. Like, here's detailed information on our target market. Here's what we know about those people. Here's keywords and so on. How do we basically make this website that big giant spider web of a marketing strategy?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And really important, I alluded to this earlier, is to give it an understanding of who it is when you ask these questions, right? So one thing to remember about ChatGPT is that it's like meeting somebody who's like kind of good at everything, not great at everything. And if you imagine somebody like that, they would probably be a kind of scatterbrained person. Like, I know people who are good at lots of things, and when you talk to them, they're just like, like it's talking to people like that is a wild experience, right? They're connecting dots I didn't know existed. You know what I mean? That's kind of what ChatGPT does, right? And so, but that's not always a good thing. If you want it to give specific information, like if you want to put in a CSV file and get some type of data analysis about that file, it is better to start it out with instructions about who it needs to be, or like what type of a response you're expecting. If you don't do that, you're much more likely to get a bad response. And critically, the way that ChatGPT works is so simple. It's mind-boggling, right? So if for a moment, you're going to play ChatGPT. Okay, I'm gonna program you. I'm going to train you as ChatGPT. Okay, and my input is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. If I asked you what the next thing is, you're definitely going to say 4. It's obviously 4, right? If that was all of your knowledge of all time, all your knowledge was just a series of numbers, then what you're going to see is, like, when I get to 3, you're going to see a list of everything you've ever seen. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you're going to see a percentage next to that. So How many times have I seen a 1 after a 3? 0%. How many times have I seen a 2 after a 3? 0%, right? You get down to 4, and it's going to say, oh, 100%. Every time I saw a 3, there was always a 4 after. So ChatGPT is going to respond with a 4. That is all ChatGPT does. That's literally all it does. So when you type in a bunch of words, it looks at those words, it analyzes it against patterns that it has seen in the past. It looks at every single token in its database. For now, we can call it a word. It's not a word, but it looks at every single like bit of chain of text in its entire database. It assigns a statistical likelihood that that will result in the next bit of response, and then it does that. You know, the way it knows to stop talking, right? You might say, well, wouldn't that just mean it talks forever? Problem is, at some point, it's going to reach a point where all of the tokens in its database are going to reach a low percentage, where it's like, okay, everything in here is like maybe 20% likely or something. And I'm pulling that number out of my tail, okay? But it's, you know, whatever. It's all the potential words have a lower percentage. At that point, it's going to go, okay, we should probably stop here, right? Nothing is particularly likely to be said next. So that's how it finishes its sentences.
That's interesting.
It doesn't think. It doesn't understand. When you have that soul-wrenching conversation with it about your mental health, it doesn't know about you. It doesn't care about you. It will give you really good information, you know, but all it's doing is repeating back patterns that it's seen in the past. That's it.
It makes me think about, and I wonder if this is something that sounds totally crazy, but because it's learning from human input into the internet, right? I keep thinking about how Uber drivers also rate us.
Sure, yeah.
Do you think that there's a possibility for a future where everyone will have a ChatGPT rating based on their contribution to the internet? How likely it was, how well it matched, like being that it can compile so much information?
I don't think that ChatGPT, maybe I should say, I don't think the company OpenAI will, I think they're going to have to pivot for all the reasons that we already talked about. In other words, what ChatGPT will do as far as like rating us versus us rating it and so on, I think that that's unlikely to be a thing. And the reason is because I think that it's very likely that, do you remember Napster?
Yes.
With Napster, you could share MP3s, right? Mm-hmm. The ChatGPT is really just it's a large language model. That word model, that means it's a file that exists on a computer, right? Every time you talk to it, it reaches into some code, reaches into that file, puts together a bunch of statistics, spits out a response, right? It's just a file. I think that in 5 years, maybe sooner, I don't even know, probably sooner, we're going to be sharing large language models at a normal consumer level. I think there's going to be like a Napster for LLMs, essentially, right? So you might have an LLM that is exceptional at scientific discovery, right? And maybe I download that on napsterllm.com. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's for ChatGPT to rate me really wouldn't matter, because ChatGPT is just going to be another MP3 in a list of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, right?
That's wild. So so they'll be much more specific and tuned towards certain things at their base approach.
Yeah. I think very likely. And the reason is because the language models are absolutely massive, right? The reason that you can't have a GPT-4 on your regular computer at home yet is because it's just absolutely gigantic, and the processing power required to deal with something that gigantic is outside the reach of most consumers, right? So, however, I think if I was Apple, for example, I would start wondering, what type of hardware do I need to put in an iPhone so that people could have an LLM like Siri, only not terrible. I think Siri's the worst. So I mean, beautiful idea, terrible execution. What if we replace Siri with an LLM, right? But how are we going to do that on the phone's hardware? Well, I think you have to have a smaller, more specific model, and you have to have specialized hardware that makes that easier to do. NVIDIA is coming out with their own hardware, obviously, that it's doing exactly this, but you're not going to fit in a whole NVIDIA card, in here. So, I guess my point is, it has to get more specific so that it can fit on our devices. And I think the likelihood that they're going to want it to fit on our devices really soon is very, very high.
Interesting. So where, like, when you take a look at where this is going as a trajectory, what do you really want to see solved with this? Like, what are the biggest problems that you believe that are working with machine learning right now, maybe AGI tomorrow? What do you think that you want to see more people approaching as to solving problems?
I think the biggest problem that we have in the world and as a country is education. And education is so critical. And I think about my time in school, and like for example, by my senior year, I was in high school. I was completely burnt out. I just felt like they weren't teaching me anything. I was definitely that student, right? Like, and to be fair, I knew 100% I wanted to be a software engineer. I was very fortunate in that way. I never wanted to be anything else. It's all I ever wanted to be since I was 12. So like when they were teaching me, certain things about, whatever, something else, I was just like, this doesn't apply to me. I literally will never touch this, and I know it, and I was right. A lot of students aren't right. I respect the process now. I'm a grown up. I get it, but like, the point is, I had the opportunity to take calculus or trig my senior year, and I didn't take either. Instead, I took advanced math because I knew it would be an easy A, and I could just walk through it. I didn't even know what calculus was. I didn't know why it would be interesting. And several years later, like a decade later, I thought, I'm going to figure out what this is all about. And the very first YouTube video I found about it, it said calculus is a type of math used to learn about the orbit of the planets. Like that's one of the reasons that calculus was invented, was to discover orbital mechanics. That's a Saturn V. Okay, if a teacher had told me that would have been all I needed to hear, even in high school, and I would have went absolutely nuts for it. So my point is, a lot of teachers. I had some phenomenal teachers. I also had some teachers that couldn't have cared less, and I think it would have been very helpful for me if I'd had a bot that I could talk to where there's no risk. I don't have to worry about getting in trouble, where I could say something like, "Hey, why do I even need to learn this?" And then just that will be really interesting, because ChatGPT knows why I should want to learn it, right? My parents might not. I mean, they grew up in a different time. My understanding of school is already outdated for my kids, and so they're going to have this problem. They're going to ask me, "Daddy, what do you think about this?" I'm going to be like, "God, that was so far over my head. I don't even know what you're talking about," So I think it's a really great platform to bounce ideas off of, and to get some basic understanding when the risk of talking to a fellow human being feels high. I didn't want to talk to my teachers about why I should learn something, because I knew what their answer was going to be, or I thought I knew, which was going to be something awful, and you just need to learn it. That's why.
It might change their opinion of you, and their opinion was important to you based on their position of authority.
Yeah, exactly. So now I can have a conversation, with something that is somewhat intelligent. I want to be very careful with that word, but I can have a conversation with somebody and get ideas for what I should learn and how I should learn it and whatever. And even once I decide to learn something like calculus, I might be able to talk to ChatGPT about those concepts. It, spoiler alert, it sucks at math currently, but you can integrate it with Wolfram Alpha if you want, for anybody that's interested in that. But ChatGPT straight up is not great at math, so be careful. But if I wanted to learn the basic concepts of calculus, for example, I think you could totally do that on ChatGPT. So access to education is a big one. I also think about kids in neighborhoods that are less fortunate. I grew up broke. My parents were broke. I was broke, and the schools I went to weren't fantastic, and those weren't even the worst schools. And I mean, imagine if you had a really excellent, totally free, or close to it free tutor that's just a really good teacher that knows a lot about a lot of things and isn't judgy or doesn't mind when you ask, "Why do I need to learn this?" or whatever. Basically, we're going to democratize quality education for people that want it. That's mind-blowing to me. That's incredible. So
I wish that made a noise.
Do what?
When you had your mind blown, I really wish that yeah, because I think that your example about how ChatGPT has limitations with math, even though we would assume it doesn't, because obviously if you can statistically predict letters in, like even at a base level, like, 26 letters plus the characters and so on and so forth versus like a digit scale of 0 to 9. Those types of things, you might think like, oh, okay, if it can do this, it can also do that. But to have these things as being separate entities does definitely make sense. That's a big unlock for me.
Yeah, but remember that when ChatGPT talks about numbers, it doesn't know what it's writing. It doesn't know that when it puts a number on the screen, that that's a number. It doesn't even know that, right? When it looks at its possible responses, it's not looking at like a full response where there's meaning behind it. It's looking at like the next 3 letters or numbers. That's it, right? It's saying, what is the statistical likelihood that this is the next thing? And so if you say, what's 2 plus 2? It might get that correct and say 4, but only because it's seen 2 plus 2 a gazillion times in other areas of the internet, right? And with the answer being 4. Some people might have gotten it wrong and said 5. And so somewhere on that list is a 5, and it's got hopefully a very low number of statistical likelihood, and 4 is much higher. So it will be right many times, but I'm definitely not going to bet my finances on it because it's gathering patterns from the internet. And, spoiler alert, not everything on the internet is true, so
no way.
Yeah. Whoa. Whoa. Not to be controversial or anything, but that's why the source material is sometimes less than accurate,
So now seeing how fast the world is moving, right?
Yeah.
How does that change what you think about when you think about the future of your kids? Like you were saying that you hope that you are part of the disruptors of labor, right? And what do you think that will mean for the future that our kids have?
There's one thing that cannot be replaced. And I think it just straight up cannot be replaced. There's not a lot I will say with any level of confidence. I think really people that are super confident about their statements are probably missing something. I'm pretty confident about this one though, okay, which is you can't replace human experience, right? So I'm not going to ask ChatGPT what the 5 most exciting things are to do in Egypt, right? I'm going to ask my buddy who went to Egypt. Do you know what I mean? And the reason is because ChatGPT might be able to come up with a list, but it doesn't know. Like it doesn't know, like in Sevilla, I mentioned Sevilla, Spain. There are alleyways in Sevilla that will not show up on any tourist information anywhere, but there's people who sell herbs. There's like herb shops, right? And they put their wares. I've never seen this anywhere else. I'm sure that they do it somewhere else, but they put their stuff out in the alleys to sell. Like, so when you walk through the alley, because you have to, it's an old Roman city. When you walk through the alleys to get from one place to the next, you're like suddenly you'll just turn a corner, not even see the herbs yet, and you just get hit with this incredible smell, this like mind-blowing smell.
Wow.
ChatGPT is never gonna, it can't smell. It doesn't know. It doesn't, and it's not my friend who I relate to and understand, at some level. And so I guess my point is the value of experience has tremendous meaning. And so I think that what I hope for my kids is that experiential products become their main thing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what that will be. But I do hope that, I think it makes life a lot more interesting that way. Do you know what I mean? Like, in other words, human experience that's the best thing about life. If you sit in traffic, you're not experiencing anything except for maybe suffering, right? But if you're out snowboarding, and you catch, huge air and you go home and you're like, Dad, I just went 8 feet in the air. It's completely insane. And then blah, blah, blah. And then this happened and you won't believe it. That's really interesting. That's fun. That's what life is. Life is experiences, right? And so what I'm hoping is that for them, life is a lot more about experiences than it was for me. Not that it wasn't about experiences. I've had plenty, but like I work at a desk all day. There's probably a lot of experiences I miss out on because my job is to do software engineering. Again, I love it, not complaining, but ideally my kids would be able to just go out there in the world, and that's what they do. Like, their job is to go and live their lives and then tell people about it or productize that in some interesting way. I think that would be pretty good. That'd be a nice future. That's the
super
more
cool.
hopeful side of it.
And I agree with you. I think in a world where eventually intelligence will almost be equalized, It will be empathy that is the desired skill.
Yeah.
It'll be those people that can connect to others.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's also going to become a feature, right? So like some of our clients most of our clients are wanting to implement AI in some way, which is awesome. But one of the things that we talked to a client about, one particular client, is like, hey, soon everybody's going to be adding AI to their stuff. I mean, they already are, right? And having human beings support your product might end up being a unique value prop for you. Like, so in other words, yesterday it was a burden to have the labor cost. Today, maybe it's your UVP, So I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be awesome. I hope, does that make sense? Like,
I totally agree.
This whole thing's going to fluctuate in weird ways.
I think that that's the thing that I really do see about the future of companies is the pressure to be elite cybernetic service providers is going to be the goal. Like the artificial intelligence is going to be the plane, but it's still going to need some of the best pilots out there.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to mean that we can build things at a scale that we never have before. And when I look around, even in the room that I'm in, everything that I can see started in the mind of someone else.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we are all standing on the shoulders of giants. And I don't know that computers will be able to come up with anything new without, there's one exception to that, without trying literally everything, right? So in other words, there's already AI that is discovering potential cures for diseases, right? And that's only because it tried 5 trillion ways, because it has all the time in the world, to solve these problems and found one. Like it would take 1,000 human lifetimes. You know what I mean? Like Einstein level geniuses just constantly trying test after test. So like in other words, computers won't discover anything new by just thinking it up. But I think they will discover new things by just straight up attrition.
You hit a huge mark, like that relativity of time. I love dogs, and they say that like dog year is 7 or 7 dog years is 1 human year.
Yeah.
But if you minimize that, you literally see a dog living a week inside of a day.
Yeah.
And there's examples like the frame rate that they see so much faster than humans do. That's why when you throw them something, that it amazes us at how fast they can like lock onto it and pick it out of midair. Yeah, and then when you take a look at even the computers that we're using now, the cycles are so much faster. Like they're living a year inside of a minute.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
Yeah,
so that's what you're meaning.
It's more than that even.
The speed of you were saying that it's more than that?
Yeah, it's faster than that. I mean, they're making trillions of decisions a second. Yeah. So it's there's a project called the At Home project. Have you ever heard of this? At Home.
No.
So At Home is like a screensaver, and it's also like there's various iterations of this, but it's software that you can install on your computer. And what they do is scientists have these packages that will automatically download on your computer, and then you use your computer's system power to like do a bunch of calculations against this stuff to find cures, like cures for cancer and cures for like COVID was a big one where they were trying to figure out how to fix the whole COVID thing. And they so the at-home software allows you to participate and help scientists by essentially downloading some of their experiments, running some of those experiments on your computer, and then uploading the results. Right?
Wow.
No interaction required from you at all. All they need is your GPU, essentially. And you can donate your computer to science, essentially, when you're not using it. I highly recommend downloading it if you haven't. It's the easiest way to like give back to the scientific community. It only costs you electricity. But the stuff that if you think about it, they have like some odd millions of users. They've got like 4 or 5 million users. So there's 4 or 5 million computers out there crunching on data nonstop. It is easily the world's best supercomputer, for sure, because it's just one giant network. It's 5 million computers essentially tied together to solve the same objectives. And that's been going on for like 15 years. That's not even new. Wow. That's old. You know what I mean? So I hope that humanity is about to hockey stick. We sure have the opportunity to hockey stick. It's just up to us. It's ours. Like my coach in high school would say, it's ours to screw up.
David, that is an incredible way to close this podcast. I love talking to you. The way that you stream ideas is exceptional, and I think more people should take a look at what you're doing at Big Human. When we've kind of danced around literally anything, but you guys aren't joking. Literally anything.
Yeah,
and this is an app, and it's so incredible. So I encourage people to take a look at that and to research some of the concepts that you were saying here, because you've touched on the tip of many icebergs today, and I really appreciate it. Thanks for
having me on.
Thank you so much. My name is Taylor. This is Leadership Line of Sight. We have been here with David Hudson. He is the Director of Engineering for Big Human. And thank you, David. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Taylor. Bye.